You're watching The Beach Brothers Show.
So look, the Beach Brothers Show is a show where we deal with Virginia business and politics.
Well, I'm Conrad Chesviner. I'm a Hampton Roads political activist. Best ideas for community improvement happen to drive me.
I help folks that are approaching retirement and in their retirement years.
I have what I call the empowerment agenda. And that means that everything I do is focused on empowerment. You want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seiko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show.
Right now, I want you to go to 3 Facebook pages. The first is Conrad Chesviner for Virginia Beach. Like that page so you can keep up with my campaigns and activism right there. Then stay on Facebook and go to the Beach Brothers Show and Community Action Team Forward Ever. Like both of them so you can see more great 757 political and business content. I want you to go to 2 YouTube channels, the Beach Brothers Show and Community Action Team 757 Battle Cats. Subscribe to those channels to keep up with their content there. Yesterday was close to danger in Hampton Roads. I believe Chesapeake saw a tornado. Definitely not weather I suggest to be driving in, though if you were, I'd hope you were in a vehicle from Southern Volkswagen, my 2017 Jetta, which Charlie Roy at 1248 South Military Highway in Chesapeake helped me get, is the type of car to be safe in. So head on over to Southern Volkswagen, say hey to Charlie Roy, and get you a safe car. Now on to some great and interesting news. As you know, Virginia Beach City Councilman Aaron Rouse chose to run for a state senate in 2023 instead of defending his council seat in District 10. With the seat relatively vacant for November, I got my political drive again. As a former candidate with 52,500 votes in 2020, as a Virginia Beach Democratic Committee member, as a co-founder of the Virginia Beach Progressive Caucus, and as a Virginia Beach watchdog from the Community Action Team, the Battle Cats, I knew if I put my name on the ballot again, I would be a great candidate to represent this 10th district. And yesterday came the news that Jennifer Rouse is stepping up to run for District 10. That is so exciting, and I'm tremendously happy. One thing for sure, I am a politics fan. For instance, as soon as I know and Aaron was running in 2018, I bought into it. In the meantime, Jennifer has been an educational leader, teaching at our local community college system. Aaron has served with distinction and resonance, an important voice and representative of Virginia Beach's Black community, especially measured against a history and a voting system that wasn't designed to highlight that very community. District 10 is a fantastic slice of Virginia Beach. The community itself has a roughly 59% minority population, and as a system is finally direct district representation, it's wonderful Jennifer Rouse is stepping into the race for District 10. I think 2022 is shaping up to be a dynamic election cycle for the city of Virginia Beach, and I look forward to hearing from Jennifer Rouse, perhaps even Councilman Aaron Rouse, over the next few months as guest of the Beach Brothers Show, of course, and friendly District 10 compatriots. To Jennifer, I say, welcome to this fun game, and I can't wait to hear from you. Now, tonight's Beach Brothers Show guest is making a return trip. Newport News City Councilman David Jenkins joins us. So let me go ahead and get him right onto the stream right there, Mr. David. Are you doing well this fine Friday evening?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for coming on again, sir. I understand you're sort of kicking things up a notch in 2022. So, what are you doing now?
I am. Rather than running for my council seat again this year, I've decided to run for mayor of Newport News.
Mayor of Newport News. Oh, that's pretty fascinating. When we last sort of chopped it up, you discussed your vision as a councilman on Newport News as the city government. It's different now. You're running for mayor. So, what is your updated vision for the city, if you will?
Well, I think that we've got a lot of challenges to work on. We need to work on gun violence in our community. We need to continue working to improve our schools, and we need to work on developing more small businesses in Newport News and enabling business owners to grow their businesses. And I think it's time that we made some smart environmental decisions. And then just on a broader context, we need to be a city that gets things done better. We seem to be very good at planning things, but not executing them. And we need to bring our community together through getting citizens involved and getting some people to have some somewhat challenging discussions.
Somewhat challenging discussions is the name of the game, if you might say, here in politics. Representation. Just doing politics is also very challenging. There's so many views, but I like the idea of just, stepping out and taking a leadership role as you're doing now for running for mayor. I do applaud that. I also recently understand that you have written some civic-based prose, Councilman. If you don't mind, may I hear that?
Okay. I wrote this. I was invited to a poetry and song event last night, and I decided to write a few things here. A poem by Dave Jenkins. I'm a councilman and not a poet, and as I read these lines, you will certainly know it. I was elected to the city council in 2018. I didn't expect my peers to be so mean. I expected to sit and learn from our city sages, but 4 years later, I wonder what they do to earn their wages. I came to fight to improve our schools so that our kids wouldn't grow up to be fools. I fought against offshore oil drilling when I thought about all the fish that it would be killing. I fought for wind and solar power because I believe this is green energy's hour. I fought for adoption of the ERA because I believe women have waited too long for equal pay. I fought for parks, playgrounds, and green spaces, and I'm glad I did when I see the children's faces. I fought to remove our symbols of hate, because you never see those in a city that's great. I promoted early childhood education, because I believe it's needed more than ever right now in our nation. I help young entrepreneurs follow their dreams to show the world their minds' bright, brilliant gleams. I fought for the right for ministers to pray. I never thought in America someone would try to take that away. I fought for affordable homes where families could dwell and escape the tenant renter's hell. I fought to stop gun violence tearing families apart, as anyone would who has a heart. I fought for city workers to have a say in their safety, benefits, and pay. When angry citizens came downtown, I was never one to shout them down. I tried to address their concerns as a government should, but they found talking to my peers was like talking to wood. I tried to build bridges wherever I went. To bring us together was always my intent. I marched in protest with brothers and sisters at my side. We all knew it was going to be a long, hard ride. In 80 short years, we've traveled so impossibly far. from the simple four freedoms of the great FDR. I know some may consider it extreme, but I believe everyone should have access to the American dream. Now I'm running to be mayor of Newport News, and it will be up to you to choose. Will we move forward or will we move back? How will we set our sails and tack? The challenges are clear to all, but will our city rise or fall? Will we embrace the world changes which will come, or will we have leaders who are deaf and dumb? It's not a question of black or white, but rather who will stand and fight for the future we all know is right. Thank you for your time tonight.
Excellent stuff. I will admit the last time I wrote a poem myself was back in high school. But I'm a fan of it. I think my favorite overall is Robert Frost, but I don't know if that's the easy one because I think we've all heard of the road less taken. But I appreciate that. I'm glad someone wanted to put some imagination into their fight for the city. Now, I take it that would be the type of thing that if a citizen in Newport News wanted to address directly to council and a mayor's audience, that it might not necessarily, be recorded or in such a fashion like that. So do you have any particular stances on the transparency of, say, someone's ability to go to the city to say something like that?
Well, I believe that anyone should be able to come to the city council and say what they want to. We give everyone 3 minutes, but one of the things that I've heard from several people who've come down is that they've been treated very rudely. When I think of the four freedoms, Norman Rockwell did a wonderful series of illustrations on that. And one of them was of a man standing in basically a city council meeting and being heard out. And, that's the way it ought to be. We work for the taxpayers, we work for our citizens. And, as far as I'm concerned, you don't disrespect the boss. You try to work with the people who come downtown and be reasonable. And that's the way I try to be.
All right. Is there any particular prohibitions or something that could be improved upon regarding their recording and airing process?
Well, here's the thing. Right now, Newport News is the only city in Hampton Roads that does not air and record work sessions. And I think that's appalling. We have a long, skinny city with the new census data in. 3/4 of our city lives more than 11 miles away from City Hall. And when we built City Hall in 1970 downtown, I don't think anyone was expecting the city to grow as much as it's grown since then, particularly in the northern part of our city. And it's very inconvenient for people to come down and view those proceedings in person. They normally occur at 4:00 in the afternoon when many people are at work. A lot of our citizens require bus transportation to get around. And it's if you have an open meeting, but you set it up in such a way that people can't attend it, to me, it seems a little dishonest, and particularly with the technology we have today, it would be very easy to stream those work sessions and record them for people who happen to be at work and aren't able to watch it live.
Good points. Now, you also, I think, touched on a couple times the four freedoms. Go ahead, sort of break down each of the four, if you don't mind.
Well, I was talking to someone just the other day, and the most famous speech in American history is the Gettysburg Address. And, you've got Abraham Lincoln starting off with 7 years ago. And, I've always been a fan of the four freedoms of FDR. And it occurred to me that it's been 81 years since he announced the four freedoms, stating what America was all about before we got into World War II. And the four freedoms are just really basic, what it means to be an American. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And, now I've gone Abraham Lincoln to FDR, and yet when I think about Newport News and the issues we face, they come down to those same four issues. Freedom of speech, being able to go down to the city council meeting and state your opinion and not be disrespected for it. One of the things I've been fighting on is the right of ministers to come in and do invocations, and to have people who maybe don't even believe in God, and atheists come in and be able to do an invocation as well, because I think that everyone deserves religious freedom in this country. I think that's who we are. And when you look at freedom from want, you look at the programs we have to enable people to start their own businesses, but also the ability of people to fight for a standard of living that's decent, like we're having with city workers coming down and wanting to unionize. And then finally, freedom from fear. And addressing issues of gun violence, I think, relates perfectly to that. We don't want to live in neighborhoods and in cities where we have to be afraid. And so, a lot of people just think that the city council is all about fixing potholes and repaving roads and picking up trash. But I think a lot of what we do relates to the bigger issues of government, and people should acknowledge that and look for leaders that have those types of values.
All right. I think now that we could probably switch over a little bit to more deeper policy related questions, if you don't mind. In my running, for instance, for city council in Virginia Beach, my concerns sort of circled around a core of like flood mitigation and transportation and lessening some regulation on short-term rentals and food trucks and electric scooters, tightening gun regulations though. You just touched on that a little bit. Reforming how Virginia Beach approaches property development. So let's sort of chop it up one at a time. Newport News has a flooding risk, same as Virginia Beach. What would Mayor Jenkins like to do toward flooding?
Well, actually, Newport News is a very fortunate city in this region because we happen to be built on a ridge. So actually, we have less of a flooding problem than other surrounding communities. But that doesn't mean that the people in those few areas that we have aren't very concerned about it when there's flooding risk. And one of the areas that we've had that happen for decades is in our Southeast community. And when Reggie funds became available last year, one of the first things I did was talk to our city manager about trying to apply for those funds to be able to mitigate the recurring flooding in that area, because I think that would be an excellent project for that. I was surprised to find that we were not able to apply for those funds because the city of Newport News did not have an environmental study in place. So earlier this year, we were able to get Reggie funds to be able to do an environmental study. So we will be able to apply for those funds in the future if they're available. One of the other areas in Newport News that we do have to be concerned about is around Newmarket Creek. And that's flooding primarily from the Hampton side of our city. And I know that Mayor Tuck has been working on a few things there to mitigate flooding there. So we'll be working with that city in that area as well.
I like that answer. And the reason why I like it is for a couple of reasons. The first is that underlying you were talking about how you want to approach acquiring additional funding. Might come from state or federal sources, but you want to get more funding into the city to address it. But also you touched on the concept, not by name, but I'll name it now, regionalism, and working with next door neighbor in Hampton. I imagine you could probably also do this with next door neighbors to the south side. What is your concept on regionalism?
Well, I'm the vice chair of HRPDC this year, and I was last year as well. And we deal with a number of issues like coastal resiliency as a region, and we're all wanting to work together. A few years ago, there was a person from Congress, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the name. She was the chairwoman on climate change in the House of Representatives. They came down and visited with us, And she had been all over the country talking about coastal resiliency and sea level rise and that sort of thing. And she was really kind of in awe of how well this region was working together and how well we were working to address sea level rise. And you hear about that a lot in the Hampton Roads area, but in other parts of this country, there are still places that people are afraid to even talk about sea level rise. And we've been working on a number of things for years, and we want to work together as a region. I look at it this way: even though Newport News is on a ridge, we're all in the same economy. If you lived in a neighborhood and your neighbor's homes all burnt down, you would suffer for that. So we need to all be in this together and working together as a region.
Of course, I definitely want to highlight again that you did mention the idea of seeking additional funding in state and federal sources. That's something I would have wanted to do on council, but that concept of reaching out for funding outside of the city could also aid in public transportation. Would Mayor Jenkins fight to improve public transportation in Newport News?
Well, as a matter of fact, I would. In fact, one of the things that I had talked to people about last year that I'd like to pursue further is going to a zero fare system. Just the other day, I was on a Zoom call with People to People in Newport News, and we had a spokesman from the Hampton Roads Transportation talking about the issue. There are lots of cities in Virginia that are looking to do zero fare, and one of the challenges with that is that a lot of people are trying to talk about this as an either or sort of proposition, where you either go with zero fares or you improve service. And when the public is asked to think about it in that way, the public generally says, well, I would rather have improved service. And there are lots of good reasons for that. But if you look at the funding that we get for public transportation in the Hampton Roads area, you're looking at most of those funds coming from federal, state, and local government already. The actual fare box collections that you get in Hampton Roads are only about $10 million in a system that costs about $100 million to operate. And the way that I look at it is, if you're spending, $90 million to put buses out on the streets and to fund a system, the taxpayers are losing when we have empty seats on those buses. And so, we're incurring all the costs, but without providing the public with a benefit. And where they've gone to zero fare routes in other parts of Virginia, they have seen ridership increased. So I think that's a really good thing. The other reason I want to go to a zero fare system is because a lot of the people who depend on public transportation, again, they went into some of the data there, and almost 50% of the people who ride public transportation have a household income of less than $24,000 a year. So, we live in an area where people are barely getting by at that kind of an income level. A lot of people are food insecure. And even though it may cost only $2 to ride the bus or $4 for a day pass, if that's your only means of transportation, it really limits your life, it limits your options, and may even limit your employment possibilities. And it may put you more in a situation where you're food insecure and where you need other public assistance. And I just think that's bad policy.
I would sprinkle in a little bit. I do remember a Harvard study from several years back, I think closer to 2015. It's something that I cited when I was running a couple times, that it's cited that the number one variable to economic, going up the economic ladder actually, is access to good public transportation. And I easily agree with the concept. I think you just described how it would work, at least. So I like the idea that is something that is to sort of run towards, as opposed to just simply let it be. And I got to be honest, it's a novel idea. When people think about buses and stuff, they're like, oh, I got to pay such and such to go from X to Y to Z. And just imagine if it was, free at the point of service.
One other thing I might add, because a lot of people are concerned about their taxes going up, and everybody's worried about taxes this time of year, getting their assessments and things. Before COVID came along, the economy in Newport News was driving our tax revenues up at the rate of about $10 million a year, which would mean that the $2 million we would probably end up paying to make public transportation free would be something we could absorb in our current budget without doing a tax increase and without having any other city services suffer. And by the way, I do think that services need to be improved, but as you can imagine, with a very small part of the budget coming from the fares that people pay on mass transit, you're not talking about improving the services a great deal using that money. And I think we could get money from other sources, maybe going back to the state or going to the federal government to improve our service, especially if it was one that was used more often, which it would be if it was free.
Exactly. Now, logically, that makes sense. Moving on to the next topic, and I had, of course, pre-prepared it in advance to the question being that gun violence is a scourge, be it in Virginia Beach, Suffolk, or Newport News. Unfortunately, as we were preparing, there was apparently another shooting in Hampton about several hours ago. So this is something that's happening all of the 757. You're running for mayor of Newport News. So coupled with the city manager, how might you want the government of Newport News to address it in your community?
Well, keep in mind, we are a Dillon law state, so we have to abide by the restrictions on our charters. But that shouldn't be an excuse for doing nothing. And we have done some things to fight gun violence in the past in Newport News. And we have a wonderful sheriff. We have a wonderful sheriff's department. We have a wonderful chief of police. And we've done some creative things just in the last few years. One of the programs we deployed, we were the first in Virginia to do it, was the Shot Spotter program, which alerts police whenever there is a gunshot in a particular area where this program has been deployed. And it allows them to get to that location very, very quickly so that we can find out where we have gun activity in our city, and also solve those crimes more easily. And it was working to deter gun violence in the neighborhoods it was deployed in before COVID. But on a kind of a different note, we have had gun violence increase significantly in Newport News last year. Last year, we went from 23 gun homicides to 30. We went from gun shootings in the mid 60s to 90s. So there was a significant increase in gun violence. And one of the things that I did was throughout last year, I had gun violence groups fighting gun violence in the community coming to me and talking about the ARPA funds that were supposed to be available, because when ARPA was signed at the White House, part of the money in ARPA was supposed to go to fight gun violence. And since we had this surge of gun violence activity in Newport News, like we're having all over the country, Newport News is not alone in this. I went to the city council in December and asked for a modest $200,000 grant program to help fund community grassroots efforts fighting gun violence. And that was the same night we had the shooting at Menchville High. Mm-hmm. And the council had decided to wait and discuss that in January. So we met again in January, and then the measure was defeated. Mm-hmm. So we did not get even a small grant program available to fight gun violence. And then the following month, when ARPA funds were voted on for appropriation, I objected because in most cities in Virginia, there were public meetings, lots of public input into what the funds would be used for. Newport News got $66.7 million. And in Newport News, the city manager and staff just kind of decided where that money would be going. And none of it was going toward gun violence. You know, a little town like Roanoke was putting about $2 million toward gun violence prevention. And I really thought that would be an opportunity for us to step up and do something good for our community and fight this problem. And I was very disappointed that didn't happen. I intend to continue fighting for it and perhaps getting the funds from another source. But, you know, they should have been there in ARPA funds for our city.
Definitely sounded like a very proactive, trek, sort of adventure along that process on your end. I appreciate that. Many people might know my own personal view of firearms over the years. So, I like the approach of a city leader trying to go out to help grassroots efforts on a front like that. So maybe we look. Yeah, go for it.
And I would be remiss if I didn't also add that we did get state funding for a study at CNU. That study was started in January. They're still working on it. They should have it done sometime in May, as I understand it. And we did get state grants for $425,000 to fight gun violence in Newport News. So we are putting some resources toward it, but I felt we should have stepped up and put some city resources toward it. And I thought we should, with our experience in fighting gun violence, be able to make some decisions without waiting for the study to be done.
I like that. For those just joining the show, about 32 or so minutes in, we are here with special guest, Councilman of Newport News, David Jenkins. Let's put up his logo here. He is running for the mayor of Newport News. Integrity, compassion, leadership, David Jenkins. On to my next question here. Of course, I am in Virginia Beach, and the city of Virginia Beach has had city workers show up to council and in public lay it on the line that they would like better pay. There isn't a large city of Virginia Beach workers union. And for the teachers of the city, it's not really a union for them. It's more of an association, of course, the BBEA. The next question will allow you to sort of touch on the idea of workers' rights and something you might want to see regarding city employees in the city of Newport News and possibly unionizing.
Well, a couple months ago, we had some city workers come down and ask the city council to make a stand on supporting collective bargaining. And it was very skillfully taken off the agenda. Our mayor immediately requested that the city manager look into collective bargaining and get back with the council. And that was a measure supported by our Vice Mayor Cherry. And so they did not get a vote on collective bargaining that night. And now it's been some time, and I'm not sure if we will see it come back up again unless I bring it up. The city manager has a way of sometimes studying things that the council doesn't want to consider for a very, very long time. And it gets buried that way, or it gets moved to the work sessions, which aren't televised and where you don't have votes and where the citizens don't know how their elected representatives stand. Now, that night, I think every single member of council talked about how much they loved city workers, but I was the only one who stood up and said, I support collective bargaining, which is, what they came here, they came down to City Hall to hear, to find out who was with them and who was not. And hopefully we will get that done. I talked to city workers about unionizing, and we've had people in our city that have worked for the city for a very long time, sometimes a decade or more, and it's very hard on them when they can look at ads for like a entry-level customer service person at Target and get the same wages there that they've been earning at the city. And, there has to be a way that they can talk to the city in a responsible, collective manner about what they feel they need to stay happy and have a career with the city of Newport News. And, it doesn't just involve wages, it also involves safety. There's some people who've reported that they don't feel comfortable talking to their supervisor about some safety issues, which they could report to someone in a union structure and feel better about their jobs and their safety that way.
That's a good point. I will like to, of course, shout out one of yesterday's guests on the Beach Brothers show, Blazin Bloom, who is running for Chesapeake School Board on the Green Party banner. And he came out to speak to Virginia Beach City Council in one of those public comment things, specifically about that same topic, workers who are city workers being able to unionize. So that is something that there is definite, you could say, community support along not only just people who are city workers, but people who know city workers who would like them to be able to do that. So opening the door and looking. Yes.
There are parts of the United States where a union is kind of an unusual thing, or where people are very mistrustful of unions. But here in Newport News, Newport News Shipbuilding is a unionized company. We have over 10,000 union members here, and this should be business as usual for us, recognizing the rights of city workers to unionize.
Good point. Very good point. Now, the next question is going to be a deep one here. So it balances on the delicate line of landlord rights, property taxes, the spiraling cost of rents in Hampton Roads. We know one of the foremost causes of inflation, and possibly the most backbreaking one, is the cost of shelter. And of course, I'm not going to deny that I'm a progressive, and I want housing to be really affordable. So it's worth it to ask a mayor candidate about, say, the proximity to real estate connections or to high-flying developers who might lean toward gentrification as opposed to sprawling affordable housing, and property values that are seemingly boosted artificially to inflate a housing, perhaps a bubble again, and increase property tax revenues. So if we could sort of wrap all this down, how would you like to just the topic of housing? How would you like to go for that?
You've given me a lot to unwind there.
Let's start the Beach Brothers show.
I worked for a home builder in modular manufactured homes for about 16 years before I came back to Virginia. So I do have a home building background, but it's mainly been in affordable housing, and those were the customers we worked with. One of the reasons we're having, I think, the spike in home appraisals right now and appraised values, which is affecting assessments and creating a whole lot of problems with a lot of people in Newport News, and I'm sure the Hampton Roads area, is that a lot of people, this is the irony of it, a lot of people, when they're looking for a house, they're payment conscious. They want a home at a certain payment level. So when we have historically low interest rates, a lot of times that enables home sellers to ask more than they normally would for their home and still have a good market for that house, because at any price point, there are only so many people that can qualify for a certain mortgage dollar amount. And I think that that's one of the things that's driven housing costs up. Keep in mind, that's the value of the house, not necessarily the payment that the person is having, but it's having kind of a ripple effect, because those higher appraisals and higher sales prices are now affecting how much people are paying on their tax assessment. So that's one issue. And one of the ways we're trying to address that in Newport News is looking at least temporarily doing an adjustment on our tax rate for real estate. So because, this was not something that anybody really expected going into the pandemic. Who would have ever imagined that housing prices would soar during that period? Now, hopefully it's a bubble. If it's not a bubble, we need to do some things to correct it. But okay, there are good points and bad points about it being a bubble. Being a bubble means that the housing prices might come back down, okay, which might be good. But at the same time, when housing prices are up, that means that there's more of an incentive for people to build new homes, which are in short supply right now. So that would be an advantage there. Also, one of the things that I'm worried about is if this is a bubble, just like when we had the last real estate bubble, when that bubble bursts, then all of a sudden you have a lot of people on 30-year mortgages and their home is no longer worth what they paid for it. So at that point, they're kind of trapped in that home, sometimes for 10 or 15 years. And that's a bad situation for people to find themselves in. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth there. As far as affordable housing, which I see as a real need in our community, I would like to see us do more with modular homes. That's something that I've talked to the City of Newport News about. I was at a conference a couple of years ago before COVID in Richmond with the State Department of Housing. It's something they're looking at as well. Because with a manufactured home, or a modular home, you're able to build it in a factory. The cost of materials are less, the cost of labor is less. You can pass that on to the customer and make the home much more affordable. One of the things that I would like to do is I'd like to see us have affordable homes for people with average incomes that they could finance for 15 years. When I lived in Texas, I had a manufactured home that I actually had gone with a 30-year mortgage on, and 5 years later, when interest rates dropped, I refinanced it to 15 years, and it did amazing things. I mean, you build equity so much faster on a 15-year note, and it's very realistic for people even changing jobs like they do these days to see the day when they'll have their home paid off and not have to worry about a housing payment and truly be secure in their housing.
It's definitely a troubling issue, is spiraling costs, but also something that's quite broad and has many different threads. I'm glad you're able to touch on all of them. I want to bring up a slight hypothetical. Again, I'm the host in Virginia Beach. I want to bring it back a little bit to Virginia Beach. At-large councilman right now in the city of Virginia Beach, John Moss, who I have a good respect for because he's very transparent. He shares his thoughts very authoritatively, if a bit overly fiscally conservative, borderline libertarianish, but he brings his thoughts to the people in a way that I don't think any of the other Virginia Beach city government leaders do. So I appreciate that. But he is bringing forth in the new budget talks an idea to sort of hold the property tax level as it was, or perhaps reduce it a little bit to try to make sure that it has a revenue neutral aspect from year to year. And it might actually be a real estate tax cut because appraisals have jumped up values over the past year. So hypothetically, if there was someone on council and you are mayor, but they are trying to cut real estate taxes in a time like this, would you at least engage the idea?
Sure. The city manager has already talked to us about doing that in Newport News. We've looked at numbers on it. I don't support what some people are doing, trying to make sure that the total tax revenue is neutral for a number of reasons. The house that I live in right now was purchased by my dad in 1964 and had a tax appraisal at that time of $20,000. And I just got in my tax bill today, and it is appraised for $258,000. Okay. I'm really glad that the city of Newport News did not keep taxes neutral since 1964. even though my family and I have had to pay a lot more. As the city grows, you do have to have increased revenue to fund services. We just talked about keeping wages for city employees competitive. You have to have the money to be able to do that. You have to be growing the tax base at a reasonable rate. And keep in mind, it's just like with inflation these days. The city has to pay inflated prices for everything we get as well, fuel and paper and office products and everything else. So you do have to have a mechanism for growth there that's reasonable and not extreme and oppressive.
That's the best that we can hope for as people who want a good, solid, reasonable government doing good things. It needs tools to operate with, and it's going to need funding in order to do that. We don't want, as you just said, we don't want to be too burdening on the public. So that's why, even though you'd be a different mindset as, say, someone like Councilman Moss and the hypothetical and maybe soon to be Mayor Jenkins, that's at least a discussion that would be worth having over just glad tidings. So I'm glad we're being proactive on that idea.
Can I add one other thing? Because I am starting to get some letters from people who are getting their tax appraisals and assessments.
Yes.
And since I've been on council, this has come up a few times. Some people seem to believe that the city council has some role in directing assessments for our city.
Okay.
It is strictly hands-off. They use professional real estate appraisers. They have standards of professionalism. It is not something that I can influence in any way as far as whether tax revenues go up or go down. And a lot of people kind of casually say that, well, obviously the city needs more money, so they've raised my taxes on my house or raised the assessed value. And it doesn't work that way at all. It not at all.
I'm glad you're able to touch on that a little bit too, to help maybe bring down some of their concerns. But we are getting closer to wrapping up tonight. So we asked the question, I think the last time you were on, about what is good in Newport news. And it's now been several more months since that time. So any cool, new, good things about Newport news you'd like to shout out?
Well, there's always something good going on in Newport news. Right now, we're looking at a really good year for our budget that we've got going on. We are going to be fully funding the schools for the third straight year, which was quite an achievement. When I came on council 4 years ago, it had been years since the city had fully funded education in our city, or at least funded what the schools had requested. Let me put that very carefully, because of course, like most cities, Newport News has always supported education more than the state requires in their matching funds. But we really made a commitment to improving our schools 3 years ago, and we're continuing that commitment. And we have some great programs going on. We're going to be working on increasing literacy with our children, and working on bringing up some test scores and really allowing our city to shine in education. And of course, we've got good things going on right now with our park system. Riverview Farm Park continues to be developed as part of the SWIFT program. There, we were able to get in money to put in boardwalks and expand the park onto the portion that had been used by police training for a number of years. And we're going to be making that accessible to the public within the next couple of years. And so those are good things going on in our city. And of course, we continue to work forward with our Choice Neighborhoods initiative downtown. And that's really exciting too.
Any cool new restaurants or businesses you just happen to have seen in the past couple of days you might want to reference? Or
Well, we've got a really great setup down next to City Hall downtown. We've got irons. We've got um, the coastal fermentory that has opened down there, and we have some other establishments. We're working on establishing a restaurant row down there eventually, and it's a great place to go and hang out and just visit with friends.
Good stuff. I like the idea of a restaurant row. So lastly tonight, I want to have you give us the, for lack of a better phrase, the elevator pitch for the citizens of Newport News as to why, and I'll throw it up here on the screen again, David Jenkins, the Newport News mayor, should happen.
Well, the elevator speech would be just as simple. For a long time, we've had city leaders who have been not really leaders, but just kind of rubber stamping whatever the city manager had in mind for the city. And I think that it's important for us to have people who are there to provide direction to the city manager and work with professionals. You see that at every level of government, whether it's Washington or Richmond. So the local level is no different. And we need to have leaders that are stepping up and tackling issues. It seems like it's very easy on the city council, just like in any other job, to fall into a pattern of just doing the things that are required. And we need to have people who are energetic and who are excited about coming to work, and people who are excited about making a difference in their community and are able to translate that into meaningful action. And so I'm extremely thankful for the 4 years that I've had in office. I hope I'm able to continue as the mayor. And I look forward to some great things happening in Newport News, but really just changing the whole attitude of council. And, Newport News has a really unique election cycle this year, and I can't stress that enough. We are going to have a new mayor after 12 years, and we're going to have 3 new members of council. So we're going to have a real opportunity in Newport News to make change that we have needed for a really long time, and to really change the way that people serve in their office as council people. And I think we've really needed that.
Great to hear. And I personally want to thank you again for coming on the Beach Brothers Show. Just share your ideas about why you want to run, become a mayor now for Newport News. So again, Councilman David Jenkins, thank you for coming on the Beach Brothers Show once again, and definitely got to have you on again in the future.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night. Now you've watched another great Beach Brothers show. Thank you for joining us as we discuss Virginia Beach business and politics. I'm Conrad Chesvernay in Virginia Beach. I appreciate you watching tonight, and take care.
It's never too early or too late to plan for retirement. Let me show you how to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your assets from loss due to catastrophic decisions that may affect you the rest of your life. Please call me.
This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money, and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.